Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another fabulous episode of Conversational Witchcraft with me, Dawn the Kitchen Witch. Before we get going, I'm giving you your reminder to subscribe to this channel. And if you love what we're doing and you want to support us, you can click the support link. Help us bring you more great information, more fantastic inspiration. And don't forget, if you want to learn about me and food magic and some of my books, like The Beginner's Guide to Kitchen Witchcraft for Beginners, and I can't even think of the names of my own books. How sad is that? You can visit me directly at cucinaAurora.com. Oh my goodness, I'm really excited because today we're going to learn so much. We have Kate Freuler on the show today. And Kate is an author of Blood and Bones, working with Shadow Magick and the Dark Moon. And her brand new book, The Magic at the Crossroads, The Devil in Modern Witchcraft. She lives in Ontario, Canada, and has been studying the occult for most of her life. Kate, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to have you. As I said before I hit all the buttons, I don't work in these realms. This is stuff that I don't really know a lot about. So I'm really excited to learn from you with your new book and The Devil in Modern Witchcraft. Like it's just fascinating to me. But before we get into that, you've been studying the occult for most of your life, right? So how did you find this path? Like what brought you here?
Honestly, when people ask me this question, I'm kind of like, I don't have a defining moment. So many people say, well, this happened and that happened, and I discovered witchcraft.
Yeah.
For me, it was more like, for as long as I can remember, it has just been something I love and am interested in. Um, I didn't grow up with a specific religion, and so I was free to sort of just seek out my own interests, and nobody criticized that.
Oh, I love it.
Um, So I just, I was drawn to kind of anything that was a little bit strange. I really liked the devil. And and some of it may have come from just like horror movies and things like that
Yeah, yeah.
when I was younger, and it was just something, I was fascinated by things like ghosts or anything a little, occulty.
Yeah.
And so when I was young, I started looking into that. I grew up in a very small town, and it was the 80s and there weren't many resources, so I had to kind of work with what was at the public library, which was like 5 books. And it was they were mostly like the history of witchcraft, or and they were written in the 60s stuff. And so I kind of had to piece together things on my own.
Yeah.
And eventually, I discovered in the 90s, and I was a teenager, there was that kind of like resurgence of witchcraft books came out, and I
Yeah.
found Llewellyn books and learned more about what witchcraft actually kind of was, as opposed to this cinematic movie, like throwing curses and things explode and that sort of
Right.
thing. It's like, okay. And I it didn't disappoint me or anything, because it was so nature based, and having grown up in a rural place, like nature was so much a part of my life anyway, like
Mhm.
the flowers, the trees, the grass. I had spent my entire childhood like outside in that, and so it just felt perfect, and like this is
Mhm.
what I was looking for. I was like, it all makes sense now.
Yeah.
And from there I continued to just practice on my own and learn. And it's just been a constant part of my life. And I don't know what life would be without it,
Right, because it's
honestly.
so like it's just part of you at this point. And you always say all the time on this show that witchcraft isn't necessarily something you do, it's something you are. It's how you walk through the world. And then we all kind of pick our specialties and the things that we gravitate towards. But like if you are already in an environment that fosters connection with nature, I feel like you're already ahead of the game. You know what I mean? Like you're already like, I spent my summers playing in the mud and making potions out of, flowers I found in the garden. Like you're already you're already there. You're predisposed to be like, oh, witchcraft. I think it's funny that you were like, in the 90s, we had that sort of resurgence. And I remember being a teenager in the 90s and everybody being like, I saw The Craft 7 times. And so I'm a witch. And I
Yeah.
remember like being like, are you though? It's not really,
Yeah.
it's not
I
really
still
who we
love
are.
that movie
Oh my
though. I
God.
still watch it all the time just for like nostalgia. But yeah,
So much. But I think it was those things that sort of reawakened people's, pop culture tends to inform what people are interested in. And like we could see that so clearly. Like I was a total nerd, and I was into like all the fantasy shows and anything that was related to dragons and magic and wizards. And then like growing up at that time in the 80s and 90s and going, wait a second, is this real? You can you can be a witch? Like I didn't know that was something you could do. Was there like one book that you remember that really stood out to you, or like one movie? Like you said, you were always kind of fascinated with the devil, right? And I know that a lot of your work is kind of like Dark Moon and the darker kind of stuff. Like, is there something specific that drew you there versus like fairy magic and kitchen witchcraft and herbalism? And you're like, no, the dark stuff for me. Like,
well, I mean, I really like all that other stuff too. It just happened to be when I wrote Of Blood and Bones, that's where my life was then.
yeah,
Um, don't like all the other stuff. I love that stuff too. It just didn't make it into the book. You know, it just happened to go into the
yeah,
sort of like other stuff. But in terms of that specific like subject matter, um, that was written, I started writing it in like 2016.
wow,
When my mom had cancer and me and my family took care of her during her end of life instead of her going to hospice and things like that. And
yeah,
that was like a really profound experience for obvious reasons. And,
yeah,
it just made me really think about cycles of life and cycles of nature and cycles of the moon and how it's all the same. And,
mm-hmm.
that's witchcraft. But
Yeah,
in terms of me being drawn to these sort of darker things, especially the devil, I mean, that is sort of one that I don't know why. I don't know what it is. If I think back, what comes to mind specifically is those books from the crafty little library I'm talking, not the crap, no
no
library.
library scrappy.
But their witchcraft section wasn't great. But those books, and those old, like those woodcuts of like the really
Yeah,
old, like those pictures, those for some
yeah, I know
reason,
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, I loved those. And then I remember the movie The Exorcist. With I don't know what that, it doesn't really relate to witchcraft, but I loved that, like the whole like kind of mood of that movie and the music and like when I was only like 10 or something, but that stuff
Wow.
and all those, those terrible 80s movies like Witchboard, which is about Ouija boards and like I can't even name them all. The Omen, those ones sort of made me very like interested in things like I remember a scene where the little kid in The Omen has like a 666 on him, but he's got all these special powers. And as a child, I was like, hmm,
Hmm. Is he evil? I mean, that's kind of cool. I could
yeah,
use those
like,
powers for good. He could do all this stuff. I was always
mhm.
freaked out by that.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I am definitely not an occulty witch. Like it's groovy. I love, like I'm there with you, but when it comes to things like that, it's just not a space that I work in. So that's why I'm kind of fascinated, like what draws you to work in those spaces. And similarly, my father passed away of cancer about 10 years ago. And, doing a lot of the care for him and going through that. It's funny because I was just doing an interview right before this in which we were talking about the same situation. So it's interesting because that makes me feel like he's here somewhere going, hey, you need to talk about me today. Right. But it does, going through those experiences and experiencing death um kind of changes your perspective on life and the spaces in which we do work and give you more of an appreciation for what would be considered, quote, dark, that are really just regular, right? I mean, you can't have light without dark. So you have to have death with life, and you have to have that balance, and balance is very important to me in my practice. So would you agree that going through that experience made you look at your spirituality differently, or give you a better perspective on light or life going through death with your mom?
It definitely impacted the way that I think about the bigger picture, spirituality, death and life and things like that. And it made me really see that we are of the earth, like we are just part of the earth. And all of these cycles happen to us too, our bodies, our minds, even like repeated in little ways throughout our lives. And I also learned that during these sort of like fallow periods or a dark moon period in your life and things, it's not that nothing is happening, although it can kind of feel like that. Um, the darkness is where growth happens. You just
Mm.
can't, sometimes you don't know it's growth because it is upsetting or it just feels blah or, but I think some of our biggest growth spurts have to have that kind of like, destruction has to happen in order for creation to happen kind of thing. And so I think, I kind of thought that during this time, although it was awful and, you know, very hard to go through, I would say that yes, I learned a lot and it changed my
Mm.
views on everything, like spirituality,
100%.
everything.
Everything. When you experience that, I often, you're gonna laugh, this is terrible. Um, Notwithstanding that the author is problematic, the fact that Harry Potter can see thestrals, and then, right, so you know the reference I'm talking about. He can see these creatures that are invisible to everyone else because he has seen death. And there's only one other person at Hogwarts that can see these mythical creatures because she has also seen death. So this idea that seeing death allows you to be open and see things you hadn't seen before. It intrinsically changes the way you view the world. And I often think about my experience in seeing death and how that has changed the way I see the world and also the way I see witchcraft.
Yeah, I had similar thoughts about that part with those creatures. And I was like, oh yeah, that is like that makes sense. That is what it's like after you've become close to death and you've held hands with death. It changes your witchcraft for sure and everything else.
For
But
sure. Yeah,
yeah.
it does change your witchcraft. Again, it's not something that I even really put the pieces together until having this conversation going, well, it definitely changes your perspective and how you practice. Um, so that is kind of what informed your first book, and expressing those experiences through witchcraft in this book, which I think, is kind of amazing. And I'm going to be like super honest, I don't have a copy of that book. I have a copy of your new book. So now I'm like, oh crap, I gotta go get the other one because that sounds pretty freaking great. The new book is all about the crossroads, magic at the crossroads, the devil in modern witchcraft, which I think is really interesting because when I think about crossroads, I'm often thinking about Akate. I'm not
Yeah.
thinking about Lucifer. I'm not thinking about Satan, which I don't think a lot of people work with these deity, these uh, energetic uh, personifications. So just going back a little bit, and you saying you're always kind of drawn to this. I want to use the word character. Forgive me if it's the wrong
No, that's
word,
totally fine.
right? Is it because this is he has been ostracized, he's been thrown out, he's different?
Probably part of the appeal, especially when I was younger, was that it was so, everybody would get all upset over it and was afraid of him and things like that. And I was like, that's kind of interesting, like when everybody gives something so much attention, you have to wonder, like, well, what's the big deal? I want to know more about that,
Right? Yeah.
So. I think that's probably definitely part of it. And then as I started to learn more and more about the devil as I got older and things like that, especially in the writing of this book, the actual history of the devil and Satan, Lucifer, it just really made more and more sense to me the more I learned about it and what the devil archetype or like symbolizes, which is not just someone or something that has been outcast, but also someone who thinks differently, who asks questions, who thinks for
Mm,
themselves and doesn't, look to others or rules or things to tell them who they are. And I think
wow.
most people can relate to that in some way.
Well, okay. I really want to explore this because this is a lot to unpack. We have to take a quick break. I want to
Okay.
talk to our sponsors. I want to hear from them. And then I want to come back to this because I don't want to interrupt in the middle of all of this really coolness. So we'll be right back with Kate Freuler talking about magic at the crossroads, the devil in modern witchcraft. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back with Kate Freuler, and we're talking about the devil and how the archetype of the devil is that person that questions, uh, maybe challenges authority, right? And how that has been demonized, right?
Yes, it absolutely has.
Right.
Not
So,
just in not just in religion, although that's part of it, like the
yeah.
devil is the bad guy in religion, some religions. But it's also a larger picture. Like if you look back at like romantic era artists who were part of like the French Revolution, they used the symbolism of the devil to express fighting back against this, outdated authority that it was arbitrary. Like it was just a structure that was in charge of everything. And they were like, no, we're fighting against this, the whole counterculture thing. And they were anti-clerical. And so they embraced the devil not only as an offensive thing to oppose that structure, but also to represent like the opposite of this like oppressive system that was like these are the rules, this is who you are, you stay down there, we stay up here. And people were forced to kind of accept that and still are in many scenarios, but it's not always religious. It can also be like any kind of oppressive structure that there's so many of. So the idea of the symbolism of the devil doesn't have to be the devil of Christianity. It can be the idea of just revolt against
Mm.
whatever it is in your life that is stopping you from being yourself or experiencing your full potential, or, that's just, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, individualism, independent thought. Uh,
Mhm.
I mean, I was raised in a very traditional Catholic family, right? In a very traditional Catholic upbringing and Sunday school and all that jazz. And I remember one of the prevailing theories that was always taught was God's greatest gift to humanity is free will. Free will, free will, free will. We were given free will as human beings. We were given free will. But within the confines of this religious organization, your free will can only look like this,
Yeah.
right? So you can only love like this, act like this, in some cases, look like this, pray like this, think like this, whatever it is. So you have free will, but oh, it's a box. And so it
Yeah.
never really sat well with me that people that were outside of that were different, practicing different religions or whatever, were kind of villainized in this pantheon. And that's exactly what we're talking about, right? The imagery of the devil is that free thought, that individualism, that free will. You have the free will to do and question and be whatever you want. But the traditional Christian view is, well, God didn't like that, kicked him out for having those thoughts. He challenged him, you know? What do you say to all of that?
Well, I think of it as despite in terms of religion, although I wasn't raised with religion, a lot of the values, some of the values associated with strict religion were definitely part of my life growing up. And
Mm,
um, you're a girl and this is what you are, and this is
mm,
how you should behave, and this is who you serve more importantly than anything else. And it to me, it's like, though it applies to so many things beyond religious teachings, it becomes a cultural norm. It's not really about God. It's just you have to be this way because this is how it is, or you'll be shunned, basically.
mm-hmm.
So, that's kind of the way I think about it. And having in throughout my life fighting against those sorts, that kind of thinking, like it really goes deep because you're raised that way, right?
Yeah.
And, despite it not having religion in it, it was really ingrained. Like, you are to behave this way because you are a girl. Your job is to do this and serve a man and do what he says and all that stuff. And that
Mm-hmm.
is something like I've had to consciously combat that.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, I experienced a lot of, not just from like my family or my little town or something like that, but society as a whole is like, no, women are supposed to be this way. You can't behave like that. You have to look like this. You have to be this way. And I just, yeah.
You're
So
like,
that's,
fuck that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's something I think about a lot. And that's pretty important in like kind of satanic philosophy is Milton's Paradise Lost, which is this big long epic poem. And in it, Lucifer and God are living in heaven, and Lucifer kind of thinks to himself, like, well, why is God in charge of everything? Like, why is excuse me, why is he in charge of everything? Like, what makes him so special? And he challenges God, and God's like, no, you have to do what I say, or that's how it's going to be. And Lucifer's like, well, why though? And eventually, a big battle happens, and he builds an army, and he gets kicked out of heaven, and he falls to earth. And he creates pandemonium with his own little kingdom called Pandemonium. And yet he still kind of thinks to himself, like, if only, because he goes into the Garden of Eden and he looks at Adam and Eve and this beautiful paradise that God has made. And he's kind of sworn to himself, like, I'm going to destroy his biggest creation, which is humans. But he goes into the Garden of Eden and he's thinking to himself, like, oh, but it's beautiful here. Maybe I should just do what he wants and then I can be part of this. But because something deep in him is just like, no, I can't. The reason Milton's Paradise Lost was so popular is because this sort of like humanization of Lucifer was controversial. They thought he did it on purpose to show the power of the devil by making readers relate to the devil, if
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah. Yeah.
sense. And it's tricking them into relating to the devil and then be able to say, oh, see, he got you too. But it kind of had the opposite effect because people took it as, well, Lucifer or Satan is actually in the right, because why so much authority for this person?
Mm-hmm.
And Lucifer goes through the motions of thinking, what am I going to do? He says to Eve, you don't have to live in ignorance. You could learn something if you eat this. Do you want to see how reality really is? And there's kind of a spin on it, and there's a different way to look at it. And eventually he decides it's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, I believe is the quote. That might not be
Mm-hmm.
perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how a lot of people feel when it comes down to choosing, like, am I going to be who I am? Or am I going to serve just so I can have the peace of blending in and not, but you have something in you that makes you like, no, I'm going to
Yeah.
do what I need to do. This is who I am. And you follow your light and your creativity. And sometimes people don't like that.
No, people don't like that. People don't like anything that is ruffling of the feathers or questioning or, um, individual. And I think that, thank goodness, it feels to me that the tides are kind of shifting in society where folks that are othered are being more accepted into, into mainstream, or just being able to exist, just being able to exist for being who they are, which is really wonderful. You have this incredible way of speaking about this topic that's really enchanting. And I'm curious, you had said that your first book was kind of where you were then. Is this book where you are now? And if so, where is that?
I would say yes. I guess it is where I am now, and that is in a place of I'm for a long time, especially when my first book came out. Like prior to that, I wasn't really part of any kind of online community. Um, it's not like I had a following or anything, and I didn't have any sort of eyes on me. Not that I do now, but like it was just the whole experience was very new and frightening, honestly. And
Yeah.
in the online world, I noticed no matter what you say, it can and will be used against you. And I
Oh,
just
100%.
silenced. I was like, I'm afraid to write any like articles or blog posts because it's going to be taken wrong, or I don't know enough about a certain topic and I'm going to slip up and I am going to be eviscerated, like this silencing. And I see that happening more and more to like, I mean, it's been going on for a while, but the realization that like we can't continue doing this. Like people have to, if you, we can't all just be silenced because we're afraid of being criticized or being misunderstood. And it needs to become normal again to discuss things that, like, to disagree with one another without people canceling each other, or to just have a good sharing of opinions and learn things from one another, because all of this surveillance does is like silence people. And I realize like I'm afraid to write anything, comment anything, say anything. And I'm like, I hate this.
Mhm.
So I feel like, but that ties into needing to be yourself and kind of accept the consequences. And it's liberating to do that. Not that I'm super outspoken. I'm not like, I don't go into a lot of things. I'm like, I'm not going to be just be afraid anymore.
Yeah.
And to keep other people from coming for me, I'm just gonna.
Well, and I think that your subject matter talking about the devil in modern witchcraft, I think there's probably backlash even within, because people are looking at the book or looking at the title, and even in the community going, hang on a second, there's no devil in the craft. But this isn't necessarily, these are stereotypes that we as a community have been trying to be like, no, we're not about worshiping the devil in the traditional sense of what you think. We're not necessarily sacrificing virgins, and we're not doing these things that you've seen in movies and whatever. So I imagine there's a little bit of backlash around that. So like, what is it, that you could come with one thing that around the devil or Lucifer, and I don't know which term is preferable for that particular energetic being. Um, is there something you want to, like, one specific thing that you'd want to debunk about him?
Well, basically the standard things like people who acknowledge the symbolism of the devil, and Satanists or witches who acknowledge the devil. Like it's not the Satanic Panic in the 80s. All of that was a lie. None of that is
Right.
true,
Yeah.
and nobody's sacrificing babies. And
Right.
so many conspiracy theories happened. It was terrible. There's a chapter in the book about the Satanic Panic and all of the insanity. But you know what? Like what's really scary is you see it happening again now,
Yeah.
and it just when you think that would never happen again, here it is. Um, so there's that. And also, I guess the main takeaway would be there you are allowed to blend beliefs that make sense to you. So if you were raised in a predominantly Christian society, which I was, those beings and everything, despite not having religious parents, all of the like the devil, even though that's a Christian concept, is relevant to me, as are like, sometimes people are criticized for having saints in their practice.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if you're raised with all of that, that's what makes sense to you. That's what resonates with you. So like, the takeaway is let's not hate on people for embracing their own experiences and creating their own empowering practice. Like,
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I have to say that, that walks the line, um, a very, very fuzzy line, right? And I've had this conversation with a bunch of people and going, well, I consider myself a kitchen witch. I was raised Italian Catholic, very, very religious. But one of the things that drew me to witchcraft and to paganism was that I didn't have to follow any rules, was that I could say, I can pray to any deity. I can work with any energy. I can be, I'm looking at my altar is sitting right over there, and I have Hecate sitting next to Ganesha. I'm not appropriating because this is just my own personal practice. I'm not saying that I own Ganesha. I'm not saying that I'm going to teach you how to do it my way to work with him. But I'm saying for me, when I need a little extra help in this particular area, I'm going to work with him. Sometimes I'm going to work with this god. Sometimes I'm going to work with this goddess. So I think that's the beauty, this going right back to what you're saying about individualism and free thought and knowledge. This is how things, to learn more and to broaden your practice is one of the reasons why I and so many other people were drawn to witchcraft in the first place, right? So I think it's interesting that this book is about the devil because we don't generally see this in witchcraft, right? So can people expect to find in this book practices in which working with Lucifer energy, or what can we learn about him through this book?
well, the book does have suggested rituals in it that you can do either as an atheist who does rituals because of the psychological benefit, or as someone who is already has an existing practice, can still do these rituals. And it's not like you're invoking the devil. Like
Mm.
it's an archetype, it's a symbol, it's a symbol. It's not like you're calling on the devil. And so you can integrate that sort of belief system and that energy, if you want to call it energy, into what you're already doing. And it's like, it's okay. It's
It's
okay.
okay. You're not invoking this, red guy with the pointy spears, and that's not what's happening here. Like this
No,
is
and like there's going to be lots of people who are like, you shouldn't do that. They can think that if they want to, but when it comes down to it, it's your life. And
they
if that
shouldn't
makes
do
sense
it.
to
It's
you,
not
it's
for them,
right. It's
right?
not, you're not making anybody else do anything. Like if the devil
Exactly.
speaks to you, which he does to me, then you can integrate that into your practice because it's your practice.
And let's be clear, right? Like you said, the devil, and I'm using air quotes, is an archetype. And we see this archetype in other religions. We see this archetype in literature. We see this archetype named, this guardian of the underworld, this person who looks after the dead in a lot of cases. We see this in other, mythologies, and nobody's like, oh, don't work with that guy.
Yeah.
It's only Lucifer that everybody's like, oh, scary. Me, even because so much of that, Christian thought process is ingrained in our society. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, definitely. Um, we've been, like I say, whether you were raised religiously or not, it's all there and the values are there. Um, the the beings or characters are there
Yeah.
in around you, so they make sense to you. And sorry, I lost my train of thought.
It's okay. What is something that you think people would be surprised to learn from this book, or are you something you would hope that a reader takes away from this work?
Again, that it's okay to integrate these parts of like, so in the beginning, there was a lot of people are very not in the beginning, but in the world of witchcraft, a lot of people are very anti-Christian, anti-Catholic, stuff like that. And that is why there is this rejection of all of it. Like it's either all in or all out. Like you can't blend them. And that doesn't make sense. You can blend them. Like it's personal. You can, and people have been doing it for a long time. Um, and
I know a
also,
lot of Catholic witches.
yeah,
A lot.
yeah. And I don't like when I see people backlash against that and you don't get to tell everybody what they can believe and what they can practice and what they can't. That's not how it works. Like, I mean, you can try, but
No, because you can't, you know, absolutely not. Absolutely not, because it's individual, and do you think there's something in this book that people would be surprised to learn about Lucifer and that archetype?
I think people don't know about the symbolism of Lucifer and Satan as a light bringer and as,
Same as Lucifer Morningstar, right?
yeah.
Right.
And that comes from because he was considered like intellectual, creative, embracing this like wonder, which I guess wasn't part of, religion. You weren't supposed to wonder, I guess. You weren't supposed to question anything. You weren't supposed to have
Right.
these thoughts of your own. Well,
Right.
what about life and death? What is the bigger picture here? What about this? What
Right.
about that? Well, no. But so he's Lucifer the Lightbringer because he is about thinking for yourself, being creative, the intellect, the mind, and like just enlightenment.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I don't think that's things people realize. Again, if you're going to work with these energies and you're going to work with this type of entity, is there something that you need to figure out? Is there something that you need a light shown on? Are you confused about something? This might be the type of work, the type of energy that you need to do in working with Lucifer for bringing light. I'm not saying if it makes you uncomfortable that you should do it. I'm saying consider the fact that you don't know everything.
Yeah,
Right? You
yeah,
don't know everything. There's a chapter in your book, a section in your book called Satan, Witches, and Women, which
yes.
I find very fascinating. Can you tell
Yeah,
us a
I
little
found
bit?
out a lot of interesting stuff
Yeah,
for
can
that.
you talk to us a little bit about the connections between Satan, witches, and women?
So women were always considered more likely to be tricked by the devil. Um, and if you read the Malleus, I don't know how to pronounce it, Malleus Maleficarum. Is that how
I
you
don't know.
say it?
I don't know. I'm the wrong person to ask that question.
Actually, no, I'm just going to call it the Hammer of Witches,
There you go.
which was the witch hunting handbook. And in that, I suggest people read it because it is absolutely wild. But this is what a lot of the witch hunts were based on, and it was mass produced with the advent of the printing press. And so all of it was about, if you read it, there's entire chapters dedicated to the evils of women and why, they're susceptible to the devil. When they speak evil, I think is one of the lines. Um, and just the whole thing is like women are the devil. So let's get rid of them basically and keep them in line and control them. So um, sorry, what was the question?
The question was, can you talk to us about the connective tissue of
Okay, yes.
Satan,
And
witches,
so
and women, and what are the connections that you found?
yes. So starting with that, from there, that book actually informed like medicine and stuff like that when it came to like women's health care.
Oh,
Um,
that's terrible.
I know, like,
Oh my
so, and
God.
there was not just that book, there was like connected midwives and then the advent of doctors who eventually crowded midwives out, right?
Right.
And hysteria, the idea of like hysteria as a diagnosis was very similar to what had been described as like demonic possession. But then they were like, actually, no, it's not demonic possession, but it is this problem women have. Like women have this hysteria, and we need to like just, and one of the symptoms literally was having opinions. So like it's insane. So anyway, the link of the devil to women being, during all of the witch trials, the devil was present. They said the devil was there, and they were all doing this to get power from the devil. And of course, all of the things associated with the devil were dirty and bad. They associated him with matters of the carnal and the earth, as opposed to spiritual minded things like God and cleanliness and women.
Mm.
Well, they give birth.
Right.
And
Right.
they're sexually attractive, and that scares us. And all of these dirty so-called carnal desires was lumped in with not just the devil but women.
Right. And it's
Because
that puritanical mindset of, anything that isn't godly is of the devil, and what is godly versus what is the devil. I remember in college, I took this class, and there was a book called Witches, Midwives, and Wise Women. And it kind of outlaid like in before puritanical reign, often women, were revered in other parts of the world because it would be like, oh, look, you are a human being and you can bleed for 7 days and not die. You must be divine. You must be of the gods. You give life. And then the Puritans came along and went, hang on a second, you bleed for 7 days and you don't die. You must be the devil, because only
yeah,
the
and
devil can bleed for 7 days and not die. Like,
yeah, and even just the bleeding itself, they were like filthy.
right.
Everything about you was filthy.
Right. And that has stuck with us. My God, that has stuck with us. Where does that come from? And how do we get rid of it?
Yeah, I know. It's a good question.
Right.
Um,
Like, where do you see the modern witchcraft sort of swooping in and saying, hey, this shit is fucked up? Like, how does that relate to witches? So you have the devil and women being portrayed that way. And then, oh, you must be a witch, burn her, right? Like, but what about for us today?
well, I think as people come to learn about the devil and Satan being not this evil thing that you sacrifice babies to, but a symbol of light and knowledge and seeking, I think that will I guess that's a tough question. I guess like as people come to realize that, I mean, Satanism today is a pretty big movement,
Mm-hmm.
and it encompasses a lot of issues like the things we've discussed. And I think that's having like people are becoming more accepting of what Satan is and
Mm-hmm.
not and what he is not. And as we realize that, I just think it's a lot of Satanism's ideas are similar to witches' ideas in that like the values are similar. Like, women are not the devil. We are people. And like, you know, it kind of all ties together.
Well, I mean, the devil is not the devil, right? As we've discussed, what we think and what we see in movies and what has been shoved down our throats for centuries is not, like you said, the devil is an archetype, right? And when we look at that and we go, okay, but really the symbolism is light bringer, knowledge, expansive knowledge, creativity, right? So women are not the devil, but at the same time, maybe we are, because we want knowledge and we want to bring light and we want to, educate people about our bodies and our reproductive rights. But let's not talk about that. Like we do bring life, we do bring light. So in that way, we are similar, right? And I want to rewind a little bit because you touched on something I'd like for you to kind of explore a little bit more. Satanism versus witchcraft, right? I'm a kitchen witch. I'm an open witch. I'm out at the farmer's market with my company, Cucina, Aurora Kitchen Witchery, and I'm selling my products. And people are like, what are you, some kind of a witch? And I'm like, yes. I'm like, what are you, like, worship the devil? And I'm like, no. Can you, with your expertise, give us kind of like a concise, what are the differences between Satanism and witchcraft? And then also, where do they meet? What are the similarities?
So modern Satanism is mostly atheistic. They do not believe in any deities and don't believe in a devil. Modern Satanism is about the symbolism of the devil and the values that we've talked about, like enlightenment, empathy, and expression, freedom of thought. Um, whereas witchcraft is so many things. Witchcraft is also has a more spiritual element to it. And witchcraft is about, well, they both have rituals. So a ritual in Satanism is more for the psychological benefits, like I say, and because it creates, like, there's studies that have been done that show ritual is really good for people.
Mm-hmm.
It's just good for you, whether you believe in something or not. Ritual, whether like a spiritual ritual or anything like that, like a secular funeral, something like that, is just very good for people. So that's kind of where Satanism sits in terms of ritual.
Mm-hmm.
In witchcraft, it's usually not, well, often something a little more, like a lot of witches believe in deity or spirits or like a personification of nature coming through.
Mm-hmm.
I think in witchcraft, there's more openness to the unseen and believing we maybe can't see it, but it's there,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So they are different. The way that they're the same is they both integrate elements of ritual. Um, I think the devil being part of witchcraft, we can't say he's not, because historically, whether we like it or not, he's linked to witches, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we can't just say he's not part of anything, because he is. He always,
Mm-hmm.
like, he has been for a pretty long time. So I mean, I say, why not look into that and kind of embrace that? Because he's not as bad as people say. I think he's a positive thing. Um,
Right.
and yeah, like I understand that in the 60s and beyond, they had to really separate, like, people who were part of Wicca and paganism and stuff had to really separate themselves from the devil, because people were very upset and were like, you worship the devil. And they were like, no, we don't. And they had to really make that distinction, um, because of the times they were in. But I think
Mm-hmm.
now we can open our minds to the fact that, well, we have always been kind of linked to him.
Mm-hmm.
Witches are on the outside, devil's on the outside. Witches are, you know, questioned and sort of like, not trusted. They might be evil, they're different. So is the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's kind of, we have a lot in common.
We also are the ones who have knowledge, you know?
That
I
makes
mean,
sense.
traditionally, your village, midwife or your medicine woman or your, the person you would go to in the woods for, a tea to help your stomach feel better. That's a woman who has knowledge, who can heal, who can bring life, who can bring answers. So, I mean, the similarities there are so apparent,
Mhm.
that again, you go, well, they were like, oh, women are of the devil. Well, maybe,
Yeah,
maybe
maybe they are.
if Lucifer was all about knowledge and knowing shit, and then the people in authority are the ones who are like, that woman knows too much. She knows too much. She's healing people. She's doing this. She's doing, I mean, not to get crazy, but like we see this now in society now. Women that come forward and say, I have the knowledge of this bad thing that happened, or I can heal this thing, or I have this idea, or I'm not going to allow you to speak to me like that because it's acceptable, questioning. And we still receive that backlash of, be quiet, sit down, act the way you're supposed to, be nice, smile, look pretty. That's all you're supposed to do. Right.
Yeah.
So it's still very prevalent for women. And of course, for the witchcraft community, for the pagan community, again, we are those outsiders. So I think that I just think there's so much juicy stuff in working with Lucifer. I think people are probably afraid, it's something that's uncomfortable. But I think the more we learn about Lucifer and the more we realize that, what we focus on being the knowledge bringing and the light bringing and the questioning and the individualism, you demystify it and you're going, well, it's really, that's not bad. We should all kind of strive to have knowledge and do better, right?
Yeah. And it's also about, enjoying your life. The devil was about this like carnal knowledge, right? But that includes not just sexuality, but like enjoying material things because you like the thing, you want to buy the thing, and like, gluttony, laziness, all of these things that are like very natural to do as humans were like, you can't win with all of those sins. You know what I mean? Like they're all bad, but they're all like just what we are because we are animals and you know, so, wanting something pretty, that's bad. Or exploring your sexuality, that's bad. When really those are just things that it's okay to want those things and do those things and
Right.
experience, like enjoy your life, do what brings you happiness. None of
Right.
it is like, it doesn't have to be morally coded all the time.
Right. Because if we want to go along those rules, I should be burning somewhere because my favorite thing to do in the world is curl up on the couch. So be really comfortable, eat a bunch of food, and not think too hard, like just to have a lazy day, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to be gluttonous and I want to be lazy and I just want to layer, like, yeah, because I work crazy hours and that's what I want to do. And that I find joy in that, right? But there's nothing wrong with that. Just be a freaking person.
Yes, exactly. I know. I even like sometimes, and this is another thing I have to like actively like deprogram, is the idea that like just doing anything for myself is laziness or it's wrong or it's
Or
selfish.
selfish.
Yeah, selfish. That's a big one. Lots of
Mm-hmm.
guilt and stuff imposed about selfishness.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what is wrong with caring about yourself once in a while? Like, that was another thing that I have struggled with. I think a lot of people do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, the idea of selfishness, that's satanic, supposedly, is like putting yourself first in some scenarios. It doesn't mean you're stomping all over other people. It just means like it's your life. Do something you enjoy with it. That's all.
Right. And these are basic principles that we do all kind of at this stage in the world. They're common principles. Treat yourself. Do something nice for yourself. No, do not overindulge because that's not healthy for you, but still enjoy your life. Like nobody is saying go on a drinking or an eating binge until you make yourself sick or hurt somebody or yourself. We're saying enjoy your life. And I don't think that people realize that these are principles that are tied up with Lucifer, right?
Mhm.
Joy, pleasure, enjoyment, rest, restoration, learning. These are all those things that I don't think that, I mean, I personally have never really tied them to Lucifer before. So I think that's really an interesting takeaway for sure. For sure. I think that's something people will be very surprised to learn.
Yeah, well, because the devil was the opposite of godliness, right? So it was all things earthly, but all of these earthly things are the things that make life nice.
And human,
Yeah.
right?
So, and so Anton LaVey, he's a controversial person. But his type of Satanism, it's called the Church of Satan, and he started that in the 60s. His version of Satanism was very much about like pleasures of the flesh and enjoying carnal things. And, because you were told you couldn't have those things and that wasn't godly. And he really like leans into that whole thing, but with reasonable level of, also be healthy and look after yourself. Like one of his things is indulgence, but not so much that you destroy your life.
Right.
It's a balance thing.
Right.
A
It's
lot of
okay to
people
eat an
wouldn't do
ice
it right,
cream
but
sundae. It's okay to eat an ice cream sundae after dinner. Just don't eat an ice cream sundae three meals a day for a week.
yeah, because you'll get sick. It's not good for
Because
you.
you'll
And
get
in
sick.
the end, that's not healthy selfishness. That's kind of destructive, you know?
Correct. Correct. At what point did we find, just tangent, what point did we define, indulgence as hurtful to ourselves? Like or pleasure being hurtful to ourselves. It's
Yeah.
not, right?
I don't know where that comes from,
Like where?
except the only thing I can think is that it was because it wasn't spiritual in nature, it's
Yeah.
the opposite.
Right, because they didn't know what else to do with it.
I guess so. I don't know.
Right? Like I mean, one of the things that I love about paganism and being a witch is that you have this moniker of like all acts of love and pleasure are my ritual. So as long as they're not harming anyone, right? And that means myself as well. So all acts of love and pleasure are my ritual to harm none. Okay. So if you like, you know, smoking cigarettes and it doesn't harm you or it doesn't harm somebody else, you go and enjoy your cigarettes. I don't
So
want
yeah,
to
and
do
also
it.
ultimately it is a personal choice and you have responsibility for the choices you make. So if the thing you want to
Yes.
do is like cigarettes and has like a negative effect, it's up to you. That's your
Your
choice.
choice. It's
Yeah.
your choice. I love that. And I love that about, I mean, honestly, Satanism. Like, what I have known about Satanism and what you have confirmed for me is that it is really about taking care of yourself, living with compassion, having ritual, and that it's not about devil worship as
No.
people would define it or have seen in movies and that sort of thing. So I think this has been a really, really enlightening conversation. You have brought light to us.
Aw.
You have brought knowledge to us. So you've done this work that you set out to do, which I think is really great. The book is out at the time of this airing. This book is available because we're
Ooh.
airing in August and this comes out in August. So this book is called Magic at the Crossroads: The Devil in Modern Witchcraft. Where can people find this book and how can people follow you and learn from you?
So the book will be available from the publisher Llewellyn. It might be available in your local bookstore. You might have to ask them to order it, or if it's an occult shop, they might have it. Just
Mm-hmm.
ask.
Mm-hmm.
And it's available online to order online. Um, and you can find me. I'm on Instagram at Kate Freuler, just my name, and katefreuler.com. That's it.
Excellent. Excellent. Easy peasy. And we'll put all that information on the show notes so people can click and find you and follow you. This has just been super fun. Okay, Kate, I have one last question for you. And I ask this to every guest that comes on the show. Okay. I'm a kitchen witch. If you could have me make one magical meal for you, what would it be and why?
Hmm. I would like you to make me some cookies
Cookies.
with something in them, whether like chocolate chips or something like that, but each one gives me inspiration and creativity when I eat them so that I can get a whole bunch of stuff done.
Cookies for inspiration and creativity. So cookies for inspiration and creativity would take nutmeg and nuts. So you would need something walnutty. You would need something with definitely walnuts, because walnuts are about creativity and getting your brain working and that sort of thing. So I could sub them out with pecans if you're not a fan of walnuts. But
And they look
chocolate,
like a brain. Walnuts
and
look
they
like a
look like
brain.
the brain. Yeah. And
Yeah.
actually, like nutritionally, new studies are showing that walnuts actually change your brain function and make you more alert, which is really interesting. I don't know a lot about that. It's not really the realm that I work in. But if I was going to make you cookies for creativity, definitely they have to have nutmeg in them. Definitely they would have probably have a little bit of cinnamon in them. Chocolate is a love food. So yeah, we put that in there probably just for flavor, but you would have to have some sort of nuts in there to get those creative juices going. I don't know if that's your
Well, it
jam.
sounds yummy. I would eat that.
Chocolate walnuts cookies. That's no one ever asked me to bake. Most
Oh,
people are like, you're Italian. I would have you make me like an ancestral recipe. So I love that you would have cookies. And now I feel like I need to bake a batch of chocolate chip cookies. So, and my husband will be thrilled. Kate Freuler, so nice to have you on the show. So great to learn so much from you. Really very interesting stuff. Everyone get out there and buy the book. Click on her links, follow her online. And you remember you can find me at cucinaaurora.com for more information on kitchen witchcraft and all that kind of good jazz. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being here.
well, thank you for having me.
It was a
It was fun.
delight.
That was a good conversation.
Hooray. And until next time, everyone, I wish you so many blessings and so much gratitude.